Start again.
I'm going to skip the first part. I have read the certified results and verified certificates of election of the municipal general election of November 2nd, 2021 in Montgomery County for the office of school director for Marshall Bliefeld, Rosetta Chiavacci, Amy Ginsberg, and Deanne Morris. I would like to call this meeting to order. Katie, please call the roll.
Mr. Badger,
Here.
Mr. Bliefeld,
I'm here.
Ms. Chiavacci,
Here.
Mr. Frank,
Here.
Mrs. Ginsberg, here, Mrs. Heyman,
Here.
Ms. Karyonikis,
Here.
Dr. Morris,
Here.
Mr. Antonio.
Here.
We have 9 present, 0 absent tonight.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to welcome guests and visitors this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. And the first item on the agenda is the administration of oath of office to the elected school board directors. Honorable Susan Leonard will administer the oaths tonight. Thank you, Judge Leonard.
It's on. Okay. We'll go first with Mr. Bliefeld. Come on this side. Mr. Bliefeld, look, they put an X there for you. And you go in that spot right there. Okay, if you raise your right hand, put your hand on the Bible. Okay, repeat after me. I, Marshall D. Bliefeld,
I, Marshall D. Bliefeld,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of the Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sign there. There's 2 copies, so.
Thank you.
All right, congratulations.
Thank
Rosetta Chiavacci, did I say that correctly? Chiavacci, okay. Come on up. You have anyone here with you? Hi. Good. Okay. You're going to put your hand there. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Rosetta Chiavacci,
I, Rosetta Chiavacci,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the
the
Constitution of the United States
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this
and
Commonwealth,
the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, actually. Mrs. Ginsberg. And now you have a whole crew coming up with you. think it's, you raise your right hand.
Oh, sorry.
All right, repeat after me. I, Amy L.B. Ginsburg,
I, Amy L. Ginsburg,
do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United
the
States
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and I will discharge
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Right, congratulations. Two of them. Okay, Deanne Morris. Last but not least. Okay, you have your spot. I'm not even on my spot. Okay, thank you. Raise your right hand. And repeat after me. I, Deanne Morris, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Congratulations. Signatures. All right, thank you. I just want to say one word, okay, because it's probably been a really difficult year for school boards. And I served on the school board for 6 years. And one of the things that people would always say is, what a thankless job, right? And then I would answer that, no, sometimes somebody thanks me. And so I thank all of you for your service because I know what a difficult job it is. And I appreciate it as a member of this community and my other community. So thank you again and congratulations to everybody and do great stuff.
Thank you, Judge Lerner. The next item on the agenda is the informational item per document 1, which is a board membership list. The next item on the agenda is the selection of the temporary board president. We will now accept nominations for the temporary board president.
I nominate Ronnie. Second.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no other motions, we will now accept the motion to close nominations.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Nominations are closed. And thank you very much, Ronnie. You are our temporary board president.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ronnie, at this point, the next thing that we do is we elect the president. And you would do that by doing the same type of thing, which is accepting nominations for the president, and then closing, and then
Okay.
having a vote.
Okay. I'd like to accept nominations for board president.
I nominate Amy Ginsburg for board president.
I second.
Are there any other nomination? Close nominations for board president. We vote.
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor of Amy Ginsburg for board president?
Aye.
Aye. That's it. Congratulations, Amy.
Is it turned back over to me now, Wade?
It does. Yep.
Okay. So I would now like to accept nominations for vice president.
Would nominate Joe Antonio.
Second.
I would like to nominate Zeffie.
Second.
Any other nominations? Can I have a motion to close nominations?
So move.
Second. And now do we do a roll call vote, Wade, or will we raise hands? How would you like to do that?
Michelle, I would anticipate that a roll call would be what you would do.
Okay. Katie, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Badger,
Vote for Joe Antonio.
Mr. Bleefeld,
Vote for Joe.
Ms. Kiavachi,
Joe Antonio.
Mr. Frank,
Joe Antonio.
Mrs. Ginsburg,
Zeffie Karianakis.
Mrs. Heyman,
Joe Antonio.
Ms. Karianakis,
Myself.
Dr. Morris,
Zeffie.
Mr. Antonio.
I vote for myself.
6 for Mr. Antonio and 3 for Ms. Karianakis.
Thank you. Congratulations, Joe. At this time, we have a public comment period. So we would invite members of the public to comment. Wade, would it be just on the matters that are currently before us, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so on the selection of the president and vice president, okay. Do we have anybody that has registered for public comment, Katie?
Not on Zoom or in person.
Okay, well then I will close public comment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Oh, all in favor, I'm sorry.
Aye.
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 All right, we are adjourned.
So Katie, we'll take a short break and then reconvene for the regular board meeting in a couple minutes.
We're good? Okay. All right. So again, I'd like to call the December 6th, 2021 meeting to order. Katie, can we go ahead and have roll call?
Yes, Mr.
and then we'll go from there next week. So as everybody knows, we have previously approved protocols. It started back in July, if you can believe that. We had that template that's currently in document 7.1. Then in August, we revised our local approach to extend the masking to grades 7 to 12 as well. That was, as you recall, right when Delta was starting to kick in. Then, very conveniently, 8 days later, the Department of Health of Pennsylvania issued their statewide universal masking anyway for schools. So it was in place. It's been in place across the state, effective at the start of the school year. It's currently set to expire on January 17th. There are some pending legal challenges, so I don't know when it's going to expire necessarily. But the point for us is that our families chose virtual or in person, that is for semester 1 of the school year, based on the understanding that these protocols, that universal masking would be in place for the entire semester. And then we told everybody that they would have an opportunity to change if they wanted to in January. So whatever happens in Harrisburg happens, but for here, we're keeping our promise, and our switch of any change of anything that happens will take place in January, just as we represented way back in August. So the new recommendation is starting on January 24th, which is the first day of semester 2, we'll have a revised set of protocols aligned specifically with the revised recommendations from Montgomery County Office of Public Health. Now, they have had recommendations out for some time now. They're about ready to revise theirs again. And that document isn't quite ready, but I do know I have been shared a draft of what they're going to recommend. And so I can share that with everybody tonight in terms of our approach. Importantly, most of the mitigation protocols currently in place, like hand washing or sanitizing, that sort of thing, remain unchanged. So the document itself is largely unchanged, but what to do about masking is the thing that changes the most. And I know that's the thing that attracts the most attention. Plan B. So effective on January 24th, masking in our schools will depend on the transmission level in the district, the COVID-19 transmission level. Now that chart might be a little tight to read, but essentially the Office of Public Health provides district level statistics each week on 2 variables, the positivity rate and the incident rate. And those variables are defined up there. And then each district has its own unique transmission level, depending on what both of the status of both of those variables. And at the moment, I can tell you we've been in a high transmission status for the last 3 weeks, at least, I think more even. And that's because of the incident rate. Our incident rate is in the currently I think 125, it's been in the 150s. Our positivity rate has been below high level, been actually towards the moderate. But as you see, the county determines level based on one variable or the other being in that higher rate. So for our purposes, and I think this is probably the way it's going to be for the next months, we'll be looking at incident rate and we'll take a look at that every week. And as I said, at the moment, we're in high status. The Office of Public Health is recommending that districts require masking K-12 whenever the district is in high or substantial. And then they're recommending that masks be made optional in moderate or low levels. That data is reported on their website, and a copy of this will be made available on our website should anyone want to click that, but you can just go to their the county's COVID-19 hub and you'll find the transmission level. And then importantly, it's going to take 2 weeks in a row of a different outcome. before the district changes the masking policy. So we're not going to go back and forth every week pending. Well, if say we go from high to substantial 2 weeks in a row, okay, that's fine, but still masking obviously. But then if we go to moderate, say 2 weeks in a row, then we go to mask optional. And that'll be in place for at least 2 weeks because we're not going to switch it back and forth. Whatever we do will be 2 week increments, likely more, depending on the trend. I'm recommending that we not distinguish between vaccinated and unvaccinated people when it comes to mask requirements. There's a lot of different recommendations floating from either the state level or county level when it comes to public places. And they tried to kind of match those into schools. And it's very, very difficult for a school district to discern in the moment who's vaccinated, who's not, and have different masking requirements accordingly. So I'm recommending we not do that. Masking outdoors will be optional unless, again, one of these agencies, most likely Office of Public Health, requires otherwise. And then importantly, on buses, it continues to be a federal mandate. So we'll continue to follow that, of course. And then if that's ever lifted, it'll go back to whatever Montgomery County Office of Public Health recommends on buses. There's a number of related mitigation matters beyond masking. Distancing in our classrooms and lunchrooms will continue. This has been probably our most successful strategy for minimizing how many students have to quarantine. So that especially at the elementary level in lunches, we have 6 feet in distancing, 3 feet in the classroom, and we'll continue that. Even with all the vaccine advances, and remember, you don't have to quarantine if you're vaccinated. Remember, that's not our rule, that's the Office of Public Health. But even with everybody's mask off while they're eating, 6 feet is really key. And districts in the county that haven't been able to do that have dozens and dozens of kids out in quarantine. And that's not the case here. We will continue our contact tracing as per the Office of Public Health guidelines, and that includes all the quarantine rules. Again, we did not make those up. We follow them very strictly, and it's very difficult sometimes to contact trace, depending on if something happened the weekend. It's much easier if something happened during the school day. We keep very careful records of who's where and how far and how long and all that. This is a relatively new piece. There's a concept called test to stay, which means that if you are identified as somebody who has to quarantine, and the reason you have to quarantine is because you were a close contact at some point in time during the school day, then you, your family, may choose as an option to engage in the test to stay protocol, which is something where you actually come to school, get tested immediately every other day. As long as it's negative, you get to go to class like normal. We do that now, actually. And the Office of Public Health guidelines will probably need to update their approach to that, because right now they currently have the wording that the district must have universal masking in place in order for test to stay to be an option. And remember that everybody's now going to switch away from that most likely and go to masking depending on the level of transmission. So they're probably coordinating that with CDC, getting their words together with Pennsylvania Department of Health. And I anticipate a revision to the test to stay so that it will more adequately reflect what districts are actually doing, which will be masking based on transmission. And then there's a host of other things that need some attention with regard to mitigation. And most prominently are these public opportunities for spectators or gatherings like sporting events. And those very likely, currently we have a set of rules in place, and those could well change on or after January 24th. You wouldn't want to put into your health and safety plan the specifics of every single contingency that could come up. But I can say that we'll base our spectator, say, rules for in the example of sports based on what the league protocols are. And there was a meeting on that this week. And then things like board meetings with regard to how the Office of Public Health recommends distancing for adults, I think the more vaccines come into play, the more these things will get a little relaxed, especially outdoors. So again, these will be thought about, will be processed the same way we have. I just want to put everybody on alert that there could be changes based on circumstances. Okay, so in conclusion, we very much are focused almost entirely on the health and safety of our students and staff. It's very important. We're trying as best we can to add flexibility and to be able to be quick about it, to pivot, not necessarily on a dime, but maybe on a quarter. We'll be able to change if we need to. And my anticipation and my recommendation is these protocols will be in place through the last day of school this year, so the families can make that change if they want, starting the first day of semester two in January. And then they will make that decision based on the knowledge that these are going to be in place through June. They can make an informed decision. That's why we're going to have this revised plan up for a vote next meeting, so that families can have time to tell us they'd like to change or not. I don't anticipate many families changing, but we have all the things in place needed for them to change should they want to. And then what happens after that, I say there is a thought for another day right now. So that's the extent of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions from board members.
Does anyone have any questions for Jim?
I have a question. Whenever masks are optional, obviously it does add a considerable additional amount of risk in any given situation. Given that, will there be any changes to the virtual options that we'll provide for parents and students once the change goes into effect? That's the first question. The second question is, had this policy been in place so far this year, do we know how many times we would have been in a zone that would have allowed us to have mask removed versus mask required?
Okay, let me answer the first part of that, or the second part of that first. I'm not sure if we were ever at moderate for 2 weeks in a row. It's possible towards the middle. What happens is there's a reason for people to get together, be it Halloween or Labor Day. And what we know is whenever there's a reason for people to get together, such as the end of this month, counts spike. So it's possible there was a 2-week period of time, but for the most part, we've been substantial or high the whole first semester. With regard to virtual options, the options we are offering to parents are the same for second semester as they are for first semester. And that is, we have the virtual academy. We have currently approximately 80 students in that K-12. And I would anticipate some coming back, some maybe leaving or something. I don't know. The net would probably be about the same. But no matter what, we have saved seats in all classrooms for every student out. So if hypothetically every student decided to come back, we'd have space. We did that on purpose. And at the secondary level, it's a little easier, but we stand ready to meet the family's preferences, whatever it may be.
Thank you, Paul. Does anyone else have any questions for Jim?
I have a couple.
Hey, Jim.
Thanks for keeping health and safety top of mind. So test to treat, tell me exactly how that works now, because I'm not sure I completely understand that. And then my second question is, I understand the 2-week window, but how do we communicate when we go from red to like how do we explain that, and how do people know how to track that?
Okay, let's go again, reverse order. So we're going to put a page on our website that is color coded, and we'll either Katie or I, is probably the royal we, Katie, will mine the county's website. They are a little behind at the moment, so they say they update with district level specific information every Friday. I didn't see it last Friday. There could be some holiday delays or something. In any event, as soon as they post it, we'll give our update. We'll do it once a week. And if there's ever the case where we're down, if it's a change for 1 week, we might put something out and say, hey, everybody should pay attention. Nothing's changing now, but there could be the case. I'm not going to do that if it's another high week. There's no point in that. But we will definitely communicate out that, oh, hey, guess what? Now it's the second week of moderate. So on Monday, masks are optional. And we'll send it out text and email and social media. Test to Stay is an optional program for families who would prefer to try to have their student who needs to quarantine to go to school. So remember, quarantine is someone who's a close contact. They don't have it yet. So the people who are eligible for Test to Stay are only unvaccinated people, because you don't have to quarantine if you're vaccinated. And also only people who do not exhibit any symptoms. Because if you're close contact and you start exhibiting symptoms, you're going to be presumed positive and you're going to get tested. So if you are identified as a student who has to quarantine because of being a close contact for a school-related reason, this isn't available to somebody who is a close contact because on Saturday night they had a travel soccer game and somebody was a close contact. Again, these are not our rules, but Office of Public Health says it has to be school-related. And the family will be given the option of entering the Test to Stay program, which is, I think it's every other day. Right before school, a student discreetly goes to the nurse's office, gets tested. Likely will be negative, because there aren't that many students who are quarantined who go positive. And as long as it is negative, they get to go to class. And if it is positive, of course, then parent has to come pick them up.
Thanks. One follow-up question, sorry. How do families know about the Test to Stay program? Are we proactively offering that as an option, or do parents have to solicit?
No, when notified that they have to quarantine, we just started the Test to Stay, maybe I think 2 weeks ago. So when notified that the student has to quarantine and we know it's a school-related reason, then we would say, if you want, there's this form to fill out.
Sorry, just for clarification. And this is for all students, elementary to high school, if unvaccinated?
Yes, if unvaccinated and if due to a school-related
Incident.
Right.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Duffy. Anyone else have questions?
I have a question. Hi. Is Test to Stay creating a lot of extra work for nurses? I know they're already pretty overwhelmed. That would be my first question. And then my second question would be, if we do get to a situation where we're not mask required, and let's say there is an outbreak in a school, but you're saying we're not going to change the mask policy on a dime, we're going to wait 2 weeks. Does that change if there's an outbreak? And then my other question would be, is that a contact tracing nightmare for the nurses at that point? Like, what would be our response to that? Okay.
With regard to the nurses, we actually are fortunate and we have very few students in quarantine now. So the number of students who have availed themselves of Test to Stay, well, it really hasn't been in place long enough here to even think about that. But moving forward, let's just say if a dozen do, that's on average 2 a school. That's not a burden in the morning. So that's okay. If it comes to the point where the community is in low or moderate level, and therefore we as a district go to mask optional, it's quite likely that there would be, or I don't know if it's likely, but it's conceivable that there would be more close contacts. Because remember that right now, if you're both masked up and 3 feet, you're okay. What's working in our favor is with the more vaccines out there, then the close contacts, or I should say the need to quarantine is not in place because you don't have to. So I think we're going to be okay. As one of the bullets in the slideshow highlighted is we can revisit this, even if there's no change in the county's recommendations. I really don't see like Wissahickon being substantially different transmission level than many other places in the county. And if all of a sudden 10 schools in the county go to mask optional, we're all gonna be in the same boat. So, and we still continue to stay in, I mean, I spend every Thursday afternoon with my closest friends at the Office of Public Health and every other superintendent in the region. So we'll be on top of it.
Thank you. As a quick follow-up question, just from a public health perspective, when making decisions like this, it's advantageous to know the vaccination percentage of a population. Do we have any data on that?
That's a good question. We have data on our staff percentages, which are very high. We have started to ask families on a voluntary basis if they would share with us, please, their vaccine status. So eventually we'll have that, but I wouldn't be quick to use it to draw conclusions about the population as a whole, because the submission of stuff is voluntary. What's going to be really helpful to us, though, is if we have on file the status for particular students and there's a close contact situation, it'll be that much faster for us, for our team to make decisions that way.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone else have any questions? Well, thank you so much, Jim, for that
Thank you.
presentation. All right, so now we will move to our first public comment period, which is for comments on agenda items only. And we limit this to 5 speakers on the same topic, and comments are limited to 3 minutes. I don't see anyone registered for the first public comment period in person. Katie, do we have any online?
No one on Zoom.
All right, thank you so much. All right, then we will move to the board president report. There are no informational items. Under action items, we do have 2 things. The first is the approval of the collective bargaining agreement between the Wissahickon Education Alliance and the Wissahickon School District dated July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2024. And that, I understand, is something we will be voting on next week. And the second item is the approval to appoint Ronnie Heyman to the North Monco Technical Career Center Joint Operating Committee for a 3-year term, effective December 2021 through December 2024. And we'll be voting on that as well next week. No further action items for the president's report. Next is the superintendent's report. Jim?
Okay, thank you. No informational items, and just the one action item, which again is just reviewed tonight, voted next meeting, is that revised district health and safety plan, which is a document 7-1 as part of the meeting packet.
Thanks, Jim. Next, we'll have the assistant superintendent report. Dr. Dewan?
Good evening. Thank you. I have no informational items and no action items this evening. At our next meeting, I'll be coming to the board with information to follow up from the request for us to pilot the option for teachers to turn on their camera for students who are out during quarantine. So I'll have an update on that next week. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Dewan. Next, we'll have our board solicitor report. Michelle?
Hi, good evening. I have no informational items and no action items this evening.
Thank you. Next, we'll have our board secretary report. Wade?
Thank you. There's no informational items, and we'll ask for approval of various committee meetings, including the policy committee, the work session, and the regular public board meeting at the next meeting.
Thanks, Wade. And do you want to do the board treasurer report right away?
Yes, thank you very much. There's no informational item, and we'll be asking for acceptance and minuting of the treasurer's report for October at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we will have our Director of Human Resources report. Danielle?
Good evening. Tonight, there are no informational items. For your review are 4 action items under 12B. The first 3 action items include retirements, resignations, appointments, changes of status, leaves of absences, co-curricular postseason pay for coaches, and other co-curricular changes and volunteer additions. The last action item includes changes to job descriptions of existing positions in buildings and grounds for your review. And that concludes the HR report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we will move to our communications committee report. Steffi?
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Katie. So we have our most current COVID numbers for our informational portion, and you can see here our on-campus, in-person positive COVID cases. And here we have a total of 15, 9 from the week of 11/22, 6 from week of 11/30. Next slide is our off-campus positive COVID-19 cases. So these are folks who are not in the building, not on campus. Again, week period, November 22nd and December 3rd. Total of 9, 8 for 11/22, 1 for 11/30. Our next slide is our quarantine isolation. So here, Katie has done an adjustment here, and there's actually a couple of new data points that you will see on the slide. One is % of students out, and then the total number in quarantine and isolation. Thanks, Katie, for making that change. That's interesting. So you can see in your first column, your total, then your %, then the total number of quarantine, and then quarantine number and isolation. So we have a total of 49, 34 of which are quarantine, and 15 is isolation. And these are just students in our buildings. And we're at less than 1%. Let's just give people a second because there's a lot of data here. So it's broken out like it's always been by building. Okay. And the next slide is the same exact representation, except here we're looking at staff. And you can see here we had a total of 3. 0 in quarantine, 0 in quarantine and 3 in isolation, 0.43%. Any questions with our numbers with this new display of information? Any? Great. And then there is one action item. It's number 13.1. It's approval to purchase a replacement microphone system for the boardroom. I'd like to thank Katie and her team because we've been having so many issues with these microphones, especially over the Zoom and over, how we transmit. So the new system would be wireless. And also right now with these microphones, you have to talk directly into the microphone. So the other ones will be able to pick up our sound better. So we will be asking for that review and approval next week.
And when would that equipment be made available to us if we approve it next week?
Katie?
I am hoping right now for January or February. We're in the queue. We've been talking to the vendor, but there is a shortage, so we're trying to get it as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions for Steffi? No? Well, thank you so much, Steffi. Next, we'll have our Curriculum and Technology Committee report. Ronnie?
Okay, there are no informational items. There are several action items that Dr. Dewan is happy to go over.
Yes, thank you. Our item 1 is a request that we'll be seeking for the board to approve for a elementary after-school reading program. This will be a 12-week after-school program that will target reading interventions for elementary students to receive more intensive reading support after school. The details of the program are in document 14-1, and the cost for this program will be covered by our ESSER funds. Item number 2 is a request for approval for 2 extended field trip requests for the high school. The one is the academic quiz team, and the other is the boys and girls swim teams. Information is included in document 14-2. And of course, these are routine field trip requests, and both trips are subject to both local and destination conditions being safe for travel for the students. Item 3 is a request for a student who requires intensive support services. This is a student who is currently at Lakeside, and we are seeking to increase the supports for the student. So there will be an increase in tuition costs for the amount of $55 per day, not to exceed $3,410 for the 21-22 school year. And I'm going to go out of order if that's okay, because item 5 is related to that same student who we are recognizing the Lakeside system is not quite meeting the needs of the student. And so we are seeking a placement for the student at the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth for the remainder of this school year. So until then, the student will be getting increased services at Lakeside, but we are looking to have that student placed at the Lincoln Center. And the tuition is not to exceed $30,150 for this school year. The tuition contract is under legal review by our solicitor. And then back up to item 4. This is for a student who has transferred into our school district and had a court-ordered plan to attend Lakeside School. So the judge has ordered the student to attend Lakeside. And as a resident of the Wissahickon School District, of course, we are responsible for the academic programming for that student. And so the district will pay tuition to Lakeside for the 21-22 school year for an amount not to exceed $42,021. And those are the items that we'll be seeking approval at next week's board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have one. I have questions about your elementary after-school reading program. It looks like there's 4 teachers. So is this going to be at one location, at multiple locations? And then will the students be responsible for getting there and getting home?
Thank you for your questions. We'll be seeking 4 teachers for each of the elementary schools for a total of 16 stipend positions. And we are going to be, we're working with the transportation department so that we can hopefully provide transportation to students who are attending that program who need that support to get home.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Dewan, I had a question as well about the after-school reading program. So I've heard from a parent whose child, I guess, did not quite meet the criteria to be part of a program. Have we put any thought into allowing some volunteers to come back into the school to perhaps work with some of our students that may need some assistance with reading, but don't quite qualify for the program?
Thank you for your question. We haven't yet reached out to students for this particular program, but it sounds like perhaps there was some other intervention system in place. So to your question about volunteers, right now volunteers are still limited, but that is a part of what we're looking at in terms of the guidelines we'll be providing to buildings for the second semester of this school year in response to updating the health and safety plan to see if we can have more volunteers available to be able to support in a variety of ways in our schools.
And for this particular program, what will be the criteria to participate in this?
The school teams will be working with the reading specialists using similar data criteria for what we have in our intervention framework currently. So the reading specialists will be collaborating and working with our supervisor of curriculum and our director of teaching and learning to establish those set criteria. And then families will be contacted to see if they're interested in having their students participate. And as students perhaps decline participating, that'll open up opportunities for other students, but we will be using similar data review as we do in our intervention model through the school year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Next is our Facilities and Transportation Committee report. I don't think we had a committee head at the end since Tracy's no longer on the board. So Wade, do you mind doing this report?
Sure. Thank you very much. The recap pretty much is the motions themselves, since it was pretty much the same item. So if it's okay, I'll just walk through the motions. The first 2 that we discussed at the meeting are enabling us to have 2 portables hopefully installed in time frame at Bluebell to accommodate the increased enrollment that we're having at Bluebell. So the first is the engineering to connect data and fire and electrical to the modulars. That will be bid separately, but the contract is to provide the engineering support. And then the second is based on 3 solicitations. The low solicitation was 178,000 for the modulars for the 3-year time frame. The third item was something that we've been speaking about for many, many meetings, and that's bringing forward the contracts for Breslin and Dewey to create the conversion of the middle school natatorium into classrooms at the middle school to provide, again, additional space that is needed because of increased enrollment there. The fourth item is a contract for Dewey Engineering. Again, it's a project that we've been discussing for a long time, but the creation of additional turf field, specifically high school multi-purpose synthetic fields on the lower baseball field and softball field, the baseball field being a multi-purpose, the softball field being separate. And that is the engineering to begin to develop that project. The fifth item is contracting with Gottschall Kane, which is a local architect, to provide engineering services for the improvement of the driver's lounge and restrooms at the transportation department. Sixth item is the purchase of 2 transit vehicles, vans. They're needed because we are having difficulty finding CDL drivers. We are able to get van drivers. So the quicker we can get some vans here, we will be able to transport children in newer vehicles, which we're frankly relying on every vehicle we have right now of the smaller variety. There's a fair backlog on those vehicles, but we do want to get in the queue. The seventh item we did not directly speak to at the meeting, but we sort of talked around it. And that is the development of ideas of how to deal with the Bluebell enrollment increase. And that would be hiring Breslin Architects and Dewey Engineering not to exceed $10,000 each, so that at future meetings, both with the board and with the public, we'd be able to discuss some of the options if one of the considerations was to increase the facilities at Bluebell. So those are the 7 options. Thank you. There's 7 motions.
Thank you, Wade. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, I have one. Didn't we talk about the Shady Grove pavilion?
Yes, thank you very much. And I probably should have mentioned that in the recap, but I did not. So thank you very much.
We don't have to vote on it.
We do not. It is not, but thank you very much for bringing it up anyway. We had a presentation from the principal of Shady Grove, Jason Bianca, and the president of the Home and School Association. I believe her name was Mrs. Hahn. And the Home and School Association came forward to that meeting with the hope that they would be able to develop a pavilion, much like we have one at Lower Gwinnett at Shady Grove. So there's no action item, but that was an item that was presented at the meeting. So thank you for reminding me.
Thanks, Effie. Any other questions?
Jim, I know that you had sent out an email to specifically Bluebell community regarding the overcrowding and the possible issues. And I think you said there was going to be a town hall meeting regarding it. I know not everyone in the district received it, and I think there's some confusion about it, but we will be reaching out to Bluebell families to talk to them about their preferences on how we move forward, correct?
Yes, when you say not everyone received it, you say that there's some Bluebell families that didn't get the message?
No. I'm just saying like other families in the district who
okay.
aren't part of
Yeah,
Bluebell.
good. Okay, so yes, our thought would be to proceed the same way we did it at Stony, which would be to share out enrollment projections, and they're, as you know, by school. And then the immediacy of Bluebell's note was that they're going to see on this agenda the modular units, and I didn't want Bluebell community to suggest or to come to false conclusions about the modular units. As Mr. Coleman pointed out, they're a temporary solution until such time as we come up with a plan for the longer term. And as Wade mentioned, there's an option for construction. There's also other options that we can consider, and all of that will be in a feedback loop. And we'll make sure that the word gets out to everybody, not just Bluebell. This specific communication was just for this agenda item.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, for that question. Anyone else have any questions? No? Well, thank you, Wade and Jim. Next, we have our Finance Committee report. David?
Thanks, Amy. First of all, the Audit Committee met November 29th, and the Finance Committee right after in the same meeting. First of all, I would like to point out that the audit report from the Independent Auditors Melee was stellar once again. Congratulations to Wade and Tim Matthews and the team that worked on our finances day after day. There were no significant findings in the report. The few highlights, I guess I can let Wade go over those in a minute, but thanks to them. Also would like to thank the members of the public who are on the audit committee. That's made of independent volunteers, Greg Wild, Rick Shorn, and Tanya Bridges. I hope I have their names correct. I thank them for their time and commitment to this year after year as well. Then the Finance Committee met shortly after that. Budget season is beginning, and we got a preliminary outline of what we might foresee in the coming year for the 2022-23 season. We will probably not qualify for exceptions this year, so any tax increase that we might be facing would be limited to Act 1 of 3.4%. And I'll let Wade expand on that if he wants to as well. And Wade also went through some financing bond reissues, if that's the correct way to phrase it, to refinance some of the outstanding bond issues we have and some of the ongoing construction. And finally, Wade touched on supply chain issues that we're facing for paper, cheese, milk, and a few other things that are getting hard to come by. And we're gonna believe he's recommending that we accelerate our bids to get ahead of that problem as well, so that schools will remain well stocked in the coming months. Wade, if you'd like to add anything to that, and if you would please go through the action items, I'll turn it over to you. You don't mind.
Thank you very much. I think you hit everything. Item 5, just to accent, is a motion that the board has the option of taking, and it's called the opt-out resolution that's listed as item number 5. And essentially the opt-out resolution will allow the district to have a 0 through a 3.4% tax increase. And we will go through a series of meetings in the spring into the May and June timeframe, if necessary, to come up with a balanced budget. But the tax increase would be set from 0 to 3.4%. And honestly, Mr. Frank, I think you pretty much had everything the way I would have said as well.
Thank you, David and Wade. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Wade and David were talking about with item 5, which is sometimes referred to as an opt-out resolution. In essence, that we as a board are committing to not raise taxes above the Act 1 index. One of the benefits for adopting that resolution is also that it streamlines the budget development process for us as a board, as well as for the administration. And I think, as was stated earlier, based on our current financials and was discussed at the committee meeting, we are unlikely and would probably not qualify for any exceptions anyway. So, I mean, I think this is almost like a no-brainer for us to adopt for our budget season upcoming.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Wade, I did want to ask the audit report. Where can members of the public locate that on our website?
That's a great question. My secretary, Beth, posted it. I assume it's under, there's a separate budget section. I will find out if it's in the budget section or there is also a finance section. It's one of those two places, but I'll find out where.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Moving on, we have our policy committee report. Marshall?
Thank you. We have no informational items tonight. We do have numerous action items identified in B17, 1 through 24. These action items are the approval of the second and final reading which we'll ask for next week regarding various policy additions, deletions, changes that we have gone over in our policy meetings. And that is all I have for tonight.
And Marshall, I know we have a meeting coming up on the 15th. What will we be delving into on that date?
I don't think we've actually gotten the update for that meeting yet, did we?
Coming up very shortly, and it'll be the sort of the next set of this new combined 300s. And a couple others. I don't know, Katie, what's the non-policy review batches?
We have a couple for PSBA and a couple for the district.
Thank you.
And those will be coming out later this week? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Katie. And thank you, Marshall, for that report. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Marshall? No? All right, thank you. Next, we have our Racial Equity Oversight Committee report. Paul?
Thank you, Amy. The Racial Equity Oversight Committee met on November 15th at 7 p.m. We discussed two primary agenda items. The first had to do with an ongoing conversation we've been having about racial disparity in school discipline. One thing as a result of identifying this as a problem, both nationally as well as in our district, the administration has taken on a study to learn more about how it affects our schools and how we can improve that. So one of the things was we received an update from the administration, and I'm going to ask Dr. Dewan to elaborate on the update that she provided.
Yes, thank you. So the study that Mr. Badger is referring to is called the Code of Conduct Micro Study. And this is a series of visits to each of the schools to look at what exactly is happening when students are being disciplined and how the code of conduct is being executed. It's also an opportunity to engage in dialogue with our administrators in each of the buildings around the code of conduct. The results of this study will help us to gain some insight in terms of our discipline practices and our code of conduct implementation, and could potentially offer insight in terms of what adjustments we might need to make to our code of conduct and or adjustments we may need to make to some of the practices that we are doing in our buildings. The other things that we talked about, if it's okay, Mr. Badger, some of the other next steps that we discussed along the same context is our restorative practices training, which I discussed, I believe, at our last meeting, because that was one of the action items for board approval. But that restorative practices training is going to be structured in cohorts. We're starting with our administrative team being trained actually this week. And that'll be followed by teacher cohorts in the spring. And then we'll continue with small cohorts of teachers receiving that training in the next couple of years. Our hope is to develop some internal capacity for restorative practices so that we can continue to support teachers internally, as well as having training from expert trainers outside. So those are two of the things that we talked about. Of course, we continue to explore what we're doing in terms of collecting data for the belonging or climate survey. That's something else that we discussed. And that'll give us additional data in terms of how our students are feeling and how our staff are feeling to help guide us in some of the next steps. Was there anything else that you wanted me to cover, Mr. Badger, or is that helpful?
Oh, that's very helpful. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul and Dr. Dewan. Is there any questions?
I have a question. For the belonging and climate study, is that just for students of color? Is that all, or teachers of color? Is that for everyone?
Thank you for your question. That'll be a district-wide survey for all students and all staff. And we do eventually want to explore a survey for our caregivers as well. But we're starting with a climate survey for students and staff, but that will be all students and all staff.
And when would we expect to see the results of those surveys, Dr. Dewan?
We are hopeful that we might be able to have those results in January, February.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The committee was able to provide feedback and some suggestions based on the current direction that the administration is taking, but overall, very positive, and we're thankful for the work that they're doing on this topic. The second major agenda item that we had was a discussion on the increased incidences of violence within schools locally, but just as importantly, in our region and nationally. And then sadly, we have the more recent event of the tragic situation of the school shooting that we all are aware of just this past week. And so part of the discussion was about how to identify these issues early, how to identify when children are distressed, and to have resolution techniques in place to help children resolve conflict and to avoid these types of outcomes. And so that was a very robust conversation as well. A lot of good discussion and feedback. One of the major things that we are learning with this committee is that none of these issues that we discuss will get resolved in a single committee meeting or two. And so these will be ongoing discussions that we continue to have within the committee and within the administration that we hope will provide to very positive resolutions long term. So I'll ask Joe or David, the co-chairs here, if they had anything to add or anything that they'd like to say.
Yeah, Paul, just to sort of build on what you said, I mean, I think what's important to recognize is that resolving the equity issues in Wissahickon is going to be a long-term effort for us. And so what's important is that when we look at something like the racial disparities in student discipline in Wissahickon, of which there are pretty wide gaps, first is to understand the nature of the problem, the scope and magnitude of it. And then we spend time coming up with ideas and solutions to what some of the root causes might be. And then we talk about actions that we're going to take to try to address them. But then what we need to do is cycle back with that over time, like maybe 6 months or with at least a year, to check in to see if we followed through in the actions we thought that we said that we were going to do. And then more importantly, did they have the impact and move the needle on the indicators that we're tracking? And are we improving equity over time? So it's going to be sort of an ongoing and long-term effort. Again, what's important is the consistency and the follow-through to hold ourselves accountable for taking action and then actually changing the indicators.
I have a question, Paul and co-chairs. I mean, this is certainly so very important for our district, and thank you, because we really appreciate the effort that's being put here. Are we thinking about putting maybe a dashboard together where we look at issue, how we're gathering data, and what's our action plan so that we can start seeing the evolution? Because I feel like you guys have done so much already and that we're not really fully appreciating all the work that's being done, but like for us to kind of communicate with each other and to the community, all the great work that's being done. A thought, as a communication person, I love my grids.
We appreciate that, Zephy. That's a good idea. I guess we'd have to think about a format that would be an effective way to share that information, but definitely something that we as a committee can take a look at.
Yeah, Zephy, I 100% agree with you. I mean, we have the opportunity within the committee to look at hard data on a lot of these issues within the district, but we need to do a much better job of publicizing that more broadly and publicly. Part of it also just to put the spotlight on it so people are aware that these issues do exist and to hold ourselves accountable over time if we're not actually improving them, right? And so I'm 100% behind that, and we just need to figure out how to more formally do it.
And as your communication chair, happy to partner with figuring out a way. Thank you.
Thank you, Zephy. David, did you have anything? Okay, thank you. We had no action items tonight. That concludes the report.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I'm sorry I cut you off earlier. I didn't realize there was more to your report, so I apologize
okay.
for that.
Thank you.
And I see you have an upcoming meeting on December 20th. Any insight into what will be discussed at that meeting?
We do not have our agenda for that yet, but part of that will be a continuation of the two items that we've just discussed.
Thank you. All right, next we have our report of board representatives. First, extracurricular. That was Tracy, right? Yes, so we don't currently have an extracurricular chair. What about MCIU Board of Directors? That is actually me. And we did have a meeting since our last meeting, and there were a couple of things that were discussed. I think that the most important is we have a new, let me see where I have it here. There is a new program. We have a partial hospitalization program for elementary age students that Montgomery County recently supported. And we also, we have a new playground improvement project that we're bidding on. See if there's anything else to really highlight here. We have an upcoming meeting in January on the 26th. I don't know if there's anything else really here to highlight for this meeting, but that's our next meeting is January 26th. What about, I guess we don't currently have an MCIU legislative committee person. What about Monco, North Monco Technical Career Center?
Well, the thing that's most important at the North Monco Technical Career Center is that we have an upcoming dinner. Usually we have a whole holiday dinner, but that's being changed, and basically it will be a pickup dinner where we come and get the wonderful food that the kids make.
And I saw they did circulate an email that we can sign up to pick up the dinners. That went out to all board members, correct? Everybody received that? Okay. Just want to remind everybody to pick your date and time and your meal choices. All right. Any questions for Ronnie? And then we have our PSBA liaison, Zeffie.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. All right, so we've reached our second public comment period, and this can be on any school-related topics. And I see we have one person registered in person, and that is Stacy DeWitt. And I just would remind you, you have 3 minutes, and we also, just for everybody, we will have 5 speakers on any topic.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Stacy DeWitt. I live in Bluebell. My children attend the middle school and Stony Creek Elementary. I'm here tonight to speak on the removal of books from our school libraries. Specifically, I'm here to respectfully demand the return of genderqueer to our high school library. I'm sorry, I'm a little emotional about these things. The school district, by removing the book based on the complaints of a few parents, violated the First Amendment rights of our students. Rights that do not stop when they walk through the school doors. Per the Supreme Court decision in the 1982 case of Island Tree School District v. Pico, the First Amendment limits the power of school officials to remove books from school libraries because of their content. The right to read, per the majority's decision, is implied in the First Amendment's right of freedom of expression. The school district, acting as government, cannot restrict that right because it may not agree with the content of that speech. While the district does have absolute discretion over the classroom, that discretion does not extend to the library, since libraries are considered places of voluntary inquiry. The court ruled that school libraries must be safe spaces for free inquiry, and books are inherently essential to a thorough education. Books should be judged as a whole, not a few pages taken out of context. While I do not believe that Dr. Crisfeld and the district set out to violate our students' First Amendment rights, by removing genderqueer from the library, that is exactly what they did. But this is easily fixed. Just return the book to the library. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Katie, do we have anybody registered online?
We have one hand raised, Katie Wenger.
Okay, can you go ahead and unmute Ms. Wenger?
Yes, hello. My name is Katie Wenger. I reside in Whitpain Township. And the topic that I wanted to bring up tonight that I'm hoping to get more attention for is the increase, what appears to be the increase in violence in the middle school and high school. I know that we're also seeing this nationwide, so this isn't a concern that is only applying to Wissahickon. However, I believe this should be more of a discussion within our district. It especially came to our attention after the middle school threat that was a few weeks back, in which the parents were not notified until 2 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, when the threat was known the previous evening. This should have been something that was communicated to the parents so that we could have the decision whether or not we felt safe sending our children to school that day. I think it's also important that we be provided with the numbers on physical altercations that have happened over the past 3 years, specifically in the middle school and high school, and what is happening currently, because it certainly does seem like an increase. And I think it's important that this be at the forefront of the discussion at this time. So along with communicating to parents what is being done to address this, which we did not get much information from that incident. And I think that also should be an important point to consider, that we should be informed about what happens afterwards and how this is being addressed to prevent it in the future. I would also ask that the board reconsider having no back and forth dialogue in the board meetings, because this could also be a great place for some of this discussion, obviously with guidelines in place and time limits, etc. Another idea is to consider holding town hall meetings. And this is especially crucial, not only for this issue, but the division in general that's present in our district. To have some type of discussion with our board members on issues that parents are concerned about, rather than just having the opportunity to speak here at the board meeting, and then sometimes not hearing any response to what we're discussing, and just not being able to have that dialogue that could be problem solving within our district. When these incidents, the incidents of violence are occurring in our schools, or even any type of physical aggression, parents should be notified. And especially if there are weapons threats, I would consider taking the same precautions at all 3 schools on the campus with the high school and middle school, which would also include Lower Gwinnett Elementary. And then again, please communicate to parents what is being done moving forward. Again, we're looking at a divide in our school community that I would hope that the board would address moving forward, and to make sure that they're also representative of all the parents in the district and responding to emails and communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wenger. Do we have any other registered speakers, Katie?
No other hands raised on Zoom at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, that brings us to board comments. Does anyone have any comments that they would like to make this evening?
I would.
Marshall.
I'm a little displaced over here, but hi, everybody. It's a different perspective. I think it's nice to see everybody from a different perspective from time to time. The first thing I'd like to say is congratulations to Deanne and to Rosetta. Welcome to the board. It's certainly an experience that I think you're going to find rewarding, sometimes frustrating, but at the end of the day, crucial. I've enjoyed every minute of it, even when I haven't. And I think that's really what it's all about, is knowing that regardless of whether you feel that you're doing good today, at the end of the day, there's a lot of students who depend on us, and that's where you should get satisfaction from, and we welcome you and hope you get as much out of it as we all have. I'd like to congratulate Amy on becoming the president. I'd like to congratulate Joe on being the vice president for the upcoming year. And I wish you all the best in that endeavor. Obviously, Ronnie, great job being the temporary president tonight. You did a great job. And I want to thank everybody out there who saw it that those of us who were elected get another opportunity, or an opportunity to represent everybody in the district. That being said, I do take to heart what people say when they comment, and I think they do have everybody, whether it's in person or online, has very valid comments, criticisms, questions, issues, whatever it is that they want to say to us, and I agree with them wholeheartedly that we should do a better job of not necessarily having a back and forth all of the time, but making sure they understand that we hear them. We get a lot of emails, we get a lot of messages, and I can assure you that, at least from my perspective, they're read. We try to respond to them. when we can. But we have to do a better job of figuring out how to ensure that everybody understands that we are part of the community. I don't want anybody to think that just because we are the board, that we are not part of the community in which we sit. And so when we have ideas such as having town hall meetings, not a bad idea. When we have, a suggestion that we have not necessarily a back and forth, but a response on certain issues, not a bad idea, because at the end of the day, we are all in this together. A lot of it has to do with miscommunication or misconceptions, whether there's comments about the books that are on the shelves or not. Just to create a for instance, as Dr. Crisfield pointed out a few meetings ago, there was a policy in place regarding how those books are either placed on the shelf, reviewed, or removed from the shelf beyond the board. That wasn't a board decision. That is a policy decision. And I think we need to do a better job of maybe placing that out there so people understand what that policy is, so they know how we really work. And that while we understand and we hear everything that is said to us, we do try and follow those policies the best that we can. Policy to policy, it changes depending on the type of issue. So I want, as I begin a new term as a board member, to make sure we all understand that as board members, we're no different than everybody else who's sitting here or watching or at home and attending. We're all part of the same group. We just happen to be maybe the most high profile, the ones who can make some decisions more readily than others, but we're all trying to get to the same goal, which again is always the best interest and welfare of all of our children. I think we should continue to do that and take everything to heart and evolve as a board and do what we can to ensure that we are a community at large. Because as events have unfolded, we have seen there is terrible tragedy in this world. And I'm sorry for those communities that deal with it. We obviously would never like to be a part of that, but we want them to know that we think about you and we think about what you're going through. And from our perspective, we'll do our best to try and create the safest and most loving community that we can. So with that, I'll turn it over to any of my other board members who have a comment.
Amy, I'd like to make a comment. I wanted to congratulate you on being selected as president for the coming year and to represent us going forward. And in my role as vice president, I will do everything I can to help make the transition for you smooth. There's a number of things behind the scenes that you may not have been aware of, but I'll be happy to transition to you in your new role. But again, congratulations and looking forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to working with you as well, Joe. And I appreciate any help and guidance that you can provide. So thank you. And I also would like to welcome Rosetta and Deanne this evening, the first board meeting. And I agree with Marshall. I think we do need to do a better job communicating with the public and trying to create some unity. And I hope that we can work with our communications committee to find some ways that we can do that. Anyone else have any comments this evening?
I would like to welcome the new board members too, Rosetta and Deanne. Hope you find it as enjoyable and rewarding as I think all of us have, and I'm sure you will. Having said that, really going to miss Ron and Tracy. I don't want to see you go, but I wish you well, and I'm a little jealous. But you've always, had the kids at heart, and the kids were always the primary concern. And your hearts were in the right place, and you gave and gave, and we can all learn from everything you've given as an example. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any comments?
I just wanted to acknowledge the commenters. First, Ms. DeWitt, I really appreciate your comments. I happen to agree with you. And my hope is that we can learn from this incident and try to do better moving forward from my perspective. And then hopefully in years from now, we'll look back and say, I can't believe we did this, and it'll be reinstated. For Ms. Wanger, I appreciate her comments as well. And I just wanted people to know that I do want to hear all voices. I feel like that is part of my duty and my job. So just because I may not agree with everyone all the time, and that's how it goes, but I do appreciate the comments. And like Marshall said, you are being heard. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? No? All right, well then can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.